Welcome to this week's episode of Sussex Sport Weekly Podcast. I'm Matt Pohl and I'm joined this week by Brighton and Hove Albion writer Derren Howard, Sussex Bluefin Junior Challenge Cup winner Frankie Elliott and Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford. Brighton strengthened their European ambitions this week thanks to 4 points in 2 games. Alexis McAllister's late penalty snatched a 3-3 draw for Albion against fellow European hopefuls Brentford at the Amex on Sunday before they picked up a 2-0 win at relegation-threatened Bournemouth in midweek. We'll look back on a good week for the Seagulls and look ahead to Saturday's huge game, a managerless Tottenham, a match which could be huge in Brighton's pursuit for European football. Meanwhile, Crawley Town's 5-game unbeaten run came to a screeching halt after a 4-1 defeat at Mansfield Town on Saturday. Wins for promotion rivals Hartlepool and Rochdale saw the gap between the Reds and the relegation zone cut to just 2 points going into the Easter weekend. Crawley host Bradford, who are in 8th on Saturday, before making the long trip to 9th-placed Barrow on Easter Monday. But first, we will start with Brighton and Hove Albion. They left it late, Derren, but Albion managed to come back from behind twice to draw with Brentford in a breathless encounter. How would you rate Brighton's performance and the result? I think we could be looking back on this at the end of the season as a well-armed point.
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt. The Brentford are very good at what they do. They let Brighton have the majority of the possession, which Brighton do in most of their matches, to be fair. But Brentford's always seemed quite comfortable doing that. They play to a system. Thomas Frank's got them very well drilled, and they are a goal threat as well, as we saw. I was impressed with Brentford, actually. I know they lost to Manchester United yesterday, but at the Amex, they probably deserved their point. And the goals, many of them came from set pieces, but they're that type of team. They can sort of hit you on the break, but with Buemo as well and Ivan Toney, they're a real handful. And the style that Frank has them play, and he gets the best out of those two attackers as well. So they can hurt you with their physicality and their technique, but also they're very clinical as well with Ivan Toney, as he's proved this season, is you can't give him a second at the moment. So, but again, Brighton played well. I think De Zerbi would be pleased with aspects of their performance other than their defending at places, but they continue to look a threat going forward. And you always fancy Albion to score, whereas when in the previous seasons gone by, they almost looked surprised when they scored. Brighton, it was like, more pace scored. It took everybody by surprise. But now they've found their clinical edge, and when they score, it's you think, that is part of it is the end product of the move. It's more familiar for them now, and they have more confidence going forward that when they do attack, there is going to be an end product. So, yeah, a good point in all, Matt, I think.
Well, they followed that up with a win at Bournemouth. In the past, I think some people would have said that a game against a team down the bottom away from home would be a bit of a banana skin for Albion, but in the end, it was a professional performance, wouldn't you say, Frankie? Bournemouth had moments, but it always seemed that Albion were very much in control.
Incredibly professional. Clean sheet, a fairly early goal. Like you say, rode the wave and then got a late winner. It was couldn't be more professional if they tried. You talk about a banana skin. It's been a banana skin for the last 2 teams that went to the Vitality Stadium, who are both also chasing European football. Fulham and Liverpool both lost. So it's a difficult game for any team right now because, as we know, Bournemouth are fighting to stay in the Premier League, and home games are incredibly important to teams battling it at the bottom because those are your best chances of picking up points. But it has to be said, alongside Aston Villa, who are now just 1 place below Albion in the table in 7th, obviously Brighton is 6th. Brighton are the informed team going into this run-in for the European football. They have lost two games in 15, which is an incredible achievement. They're unbeaten in their last 5. And this amazing away record, which has seen them unbeaten in their last 7 games, running back to October. So, you look at that and then you look at the teams around them. Liverpool haven't won in 4 away games. Brentford, 1 win in their last 6 away games. Fulham haven't won in their last 4 away games. Spurs, no win in their last 4 away games. And United, no win in their last 3 away games. So away from home, teams are really struggling. And it's not only teams below Brighton who are the same sort of surprise package thing like Fulham and Brentford. Big teams like Tottenham and United, United recently lost 7-0 away from home. Tottenham are really struggling as well. So we would expect Brighton, where they would normally slip up, would be away from home, away from the Amex, difficult games. But Roberto De Zerbi is thriving away from the South Coast. And I think it's going to be the thing that may help Brighton get Champions League football, as they are dealing with the pressure of being away from their home supporters. And they've got 3 of their next 4 away games are Arsenal, Tottenham and Chelsea, which, in prior to this run in all the seasons gone by, you'd be going, you'd be lucky to get a point from those. Albion are probably looking at now, and Arsenal obviously, of course, are challenging for the title, but they look at the Chelsea and Tottenham game and go, we're going to win, and we feel that we can win, especially with the issues that those 2 clubs have. So very professional performances and an incredible run of form that has seen Brighton as, now one of the favourites to get Champions League football, which is a phenomenal achievement.
Well, yeah, Evan Ferguson was on the score sheet at Bournemouth, taking his Premier League tally to 4 in 11 games. If there was any buzz around the teenager, that has surely been amplified by his delightfully backfield goal at the Vitality Stadium. We're fast running out of superlatives for the boy, aren't we, Derren?
Yes, yeah. It was another great finish, and it just shows he's got every trick in the book when it comes to putting the ball in the net, whether it's left foot, right foot, header. He seems to be able to conjure up an angle or get his body in a shape that he can, get a strike on goal from all different types of situations. It's really impressive for an 18-year-old to come in and make the impact that he has. And yeah, the brilliant thing is that he can get even better as well. De Zerbi will be working on him in training and showing him where he can improve his all-round game as well. Actually, just before his goal at Bournemouth, De Zerbi was, you could see on the touchline, he wasn't happy, and he admitted afterwards in the press conference that he wasn't impressed with parts of Ferguson's play prior to his goal. I guess all was forgiven when he tucked that away into the bottom corner, but he's watching him closely. He's going to develop him better, and he's just going to become a better and better player under De Zerbi and in this Brighton team, because for all the credit he's going to get, it's a very nice team to be an attacker in. They create lots of chances. He's got Matoma, he's got Solly March, he's got a World Cup winner in Alexis McAllister trying to feed him the through balls as well. So it's a great place for him to start his career, and he's making the most of it.
I know that we've just praised Evan Ferguson to the high heavens, and I've seen that in recent weeks he's been linked with Spurs as a potential Harry Kane replacement. Those accolades must be good for him, but at the same time, do you think we're still putting a little bit too much pressure on him after, he's not even had a full season of senior football yet, has he, Derren? No, but I guess he has been linked as a Harry Kane successor. I don't think he'll be going anywhere for the next season or 2. I don't think. You never know, but ideally you'd hope that he plays regular football for Brighton, learns under De Zerbi. He seems a very calm, assured character. He doesn't let the attention or the fuss get to him, and you'd imagine having the likes of sort of Pascal Gross, Lewis Dunk, Adam Lallana around him as well. They wouldn't allow that to happen to him as well. So also as well, with him and Danny Welbeck, it allows Welbeck, it takes the pressure off Welbeck as well. So he's not under pressure to play so many minutes. If Ferguson needs to be taken out of the starting lineup as well, because he's only young still, Welbeck can come in. So I think the combination of having those two, someone who's at one end of his career and the other end of his career, I think it's a brilliant combination for the both of them, and will help get the best out of both of them in the next sort of 10 matches and probably next season as well. Well, Ferguson wasn't the only team sensation on the score sheet for Albion and Dorset. Paraguayan forward Julio Enciso came off the bench to net Brighton second half stoppage time. For the uninitiated, Frankie, could you give us a lowdown on Enciso and tell us why Albion's hierarchy are so excited about this 19-year-old?
Yeah, I have to say, I think a lot of people were surprised last summer when £9.5 million was spent on a 18-year-old Paraguayan forward. I'm sure a lot of Brighton fans would have preferred a more ready-made star player coming in for that sort of price. But yeah, so a lot of money for a teenage player, but he is highly regarded both in Brighton's hierarchy and also in South America. He's already won 10 caps for Paraguay, which at 19 years old is a great achievement. And he started recently in their last 2 international games in the international break that's just been. He is, he's seen as a fantastic attacking play. He's very, very direct. He's very quick. You will see him 9 times out of 10 finish off a run with a shot. He's not afraid to shoot from all angles. He's come off the bench this season already and made an instant impact against Chelsea. His driving run and shot led to Pascal Gross's goal and the 4th goal for Brighton in that game. And so, there's a lot to be excited about. He's the sort of player who, when he gets the ball, there is that sort of magic of you get on the edge of your seat because he's looking to go towards goal and either a shot or a goal may be coming. I think De Zerbi has said that he wants to work a bit more in his game on being less selfish. I think that has maybe been an issue so far, is that he's been very, very focused on getting himself on the score sheet when he needs, De Zerbi needs him to be a bit more of a team player. But he bigged him up this week before the Bournemouth game and said that he was now ready to be starting Premier League games. There was a slight issue slightly earlier in the season when he came on against Leeds, and the physicality of the game, I think, was a bit too much for him, but that's to be expected, especially from away from home, and especially as a teenager. But a great moment for him to score a goal like that, especially in such an important moment for Brighton away from home. And it's a real sign, I think, of one of the undercurrents of Brighton's season is obviously we've spoken a lot about their first team players, the Caicedos, Evan Ferguson, McAllister, all these brilliant players that no one had really heard about before they'd come to Brighton. But there's also these players that are not starting games, but are on the bench that are looking that they could prosper in the seasons to come. So obviously Salimento before his injury, Bruanate and Amari that have come in, they have had shown glimpses of what they can add to the team. Obviously players like Gilmore as well that were signed in the summer, they haven't really been given a full chance in the first team yet. So there's a lot of excitement for not only how Brighton are playing right now, but also the fact that if players are sold, or if, as time goes on, that in the next 2-3 years, they have a lot of exciting young players that are not ready to be first team starters just yet, but certainly are going on the right trajectory to be big players in the future. And that's a really exciting moment for Brighton to be in, especially also in regards to the fact that there's a worry about players being sold and whether they'll be replaced. They may even have the replacements already there. So, a great moment for him. And the start of hopefully an exciting Brighton career that's only just getting going.
This Saturday sees Brighton visit 5th placed Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs are 4 points and 1 place above Albion, but have played 2 games more. Tottenham recently parted ways with Antonio Conte after a run of 1 win in 6 in all competitions. They have since named Christian Stellini, who was Antonio Conte's assistant, as interim manager, and he oversaw an action-packed 1-1 draw at Everton on Monday in his first game in charge. Spurs aren't the same free-flowing team that they were under Mauricio Pochettino, but they can still pose a threat, can't they, Derren? How do you see that one going, and how big will that game be in the context of Brighton's season?
Yeah, it's if they, they're in the mix for Champions League football, and this is this is a big one for them. You've got to beat your rivals in whether you're fighting relegation, whether you're fighting playoffs or whatever. You need to beat the teams around you. And yeah, Spurs haven't quite hit the levels this season, but you look at their squad and, you'd think that they're a genuine top 6 team, whereas Albion have taken everybody by surprise. They've got Harry Kane, obviously, one of the best strikers in the world. So he's obviously one of the main dangers. Son, he hasn't quite hit the levels, but again, he's sort of the type of player you can't really rest. He's liable to pop up at any minute and create an assist or score a goal. So yeah, on their home patch, it's going to be a big game for Tottenham and for Brighton. But it's I'm really looking forward to it, actually, because I think the Brighton players now they go away to these stadiums as Frankie was saying, and they have such confidence in their style of play now. They know they have the players, they know they have the system, the manager in place to go to these teams and cause them problems. So I expect a really competitive game, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Brighton come out on top in this one. I think they've just got the edge. As you say, Spurs aren't quite as free flowing, and I think it's going to be a really good game. The only note of caution I'd add is I think Caicedo and McAllister, they both hobbled off in the second half against Bournemouth. Brighton were quick to say, no problem, they're fully fit, they'll be okay for Tottenham. But for me, that is a concern, because they are the two key men in Brighton's midfield. Obviously, Pascal Gross plays centre midfield as well, but Caicedo and McAllister are the real class acts in the Brighton midfield, and hopefully they will be fit and firing for this one, which is going to be one of their most important games of the season in terms of their European chances. But yeah, to go into the business end of the season, and Brighton are jostling with Man United and Tottenham, I think it's great. Yeah.
Well, speaking of London teams that have relieved managers of their duties, Chelsea parted ways with former Brighton boss Graham Potter on Sunday following their 2-0 defeat at Aston Villa on Saturday. Potter had only been at Stamford Bridge for 7 months, but lost 11 of his 31 games in charge and seen the Blues drop to 11th in the Premier League and 12 points off the Champions League places. Where do you think it all went wrong for Potter, Frankie? Was it a case of him maybe being out of his depth at Stamford Bridge, or considering the amount of money chucked at it, was he saddled with players that he didn't want or necessarily need by their American owner, Todd Bowley?
Well, I think when you can reflect on it, I think when it first happened that he was appointed Chelsea manager, it seemed like on the face of it, quite a nice idea. The fact that these new owners had come in had been slightly chaotic in the first window, but had got rid of a world-class manager in Thomas Tuchel, who they had not seen eye to eye. That was very clear during the summer. And they were sort of putting in place finally an idea. They were saying, right, we're not going to be like Roman Abramovich. We're changing this sort of brutal culture of getting rid of managers and player power. We're now going to get a manager in place, a young British manager who symbolises this change of culture. And we're going to look towards a project, which Chelsea have never done. Chelsea have never done projects. They've just done winning. We're going to look towards a project, and obviously that project will take 2-3 years. We're going to bring in young players, which they did in January, and build a team for later down the line. And so it sounds really sweet, but they also got in a person that was had been doing that at Brighton. A very, very well-run club, well-organised, great scouting, and given him time to implement his ideas. And it had taken a while, but eventually they were starting to bear fruit. This, when Potter left Albion at the start of the season, they were in the top 4, after finishing their highest ever Premier League finish. So it looked like it was a really a nice match made in heaven. However, what actually he walked into was complete chaos. And that was not what Potter is at all. Potter is not a man who can deal with chaos, or was ever really dealt with chaos. He's dealt with a brilliantly run club in Brighton, and now he's come into a club where we've heard stories now of players having to change outside and sit on the floor during team meetings. It's crazy. And no manager should really have to deal with that, especially. But the issue that Potter had was he was coming to a club where the fans, who were used to people like Antonio Conte, Jose Mourinho, Thomas Tuchel, they were still used to winning. So they were not on this side of the project. They were seeing a man who had managed a team from outside the top 6, who had finished 9th, had no credentials of winning trophies, which is what Chelsea fans were after. They were very much cautious about this appointment from the get-go. Potter then didn't help himself, not necessarily doing anything wrong, but he didn't speak like a top manager. He was never critical of referees, always praised his players for the effort they gave. Chelsea fans weren't used to that. Chelsea fans were used to hearing, characters, Mourinho, Tuchel. I'm not praising it, but they used to criticise referees. They used to, give us very memorable quotes, always sort of trying to get the upper hand over their rivals. And Graham Potter has never been like that. He's always been a very controlled, very respectful, coach and manager. And so Chelsea fans, on top of his record, were then seeing a manager who was not really sort of suited to their style of what they've been used to for years. And then the other thing that Brighton have always given Potter is that I think more fans are more forgiving of some of his quite, left field tactics, players being played out of positions, playing more than 2 centre backs, a left winger playing as a full back. Brighton fans are probably more forgiving. I still questioned it at times, but Chelsea fans were not accepting of that. The regular changes, seeing Reece James play centre back in some games, or Christian Pulisic plays a left wing back. They weren't having any of that, and especially not having it when they were losing games. So a chaotic time. And at the end of it, although it seemed at the start like it was a lovely idea, that was a sweet idea about changing Chelsea, they completely had no idea of what the reaction would be. And the reaction was that no one took to it. The players didn't take to it. The fans didn't take to it. And eventually the owners didn't take to it, which is actually, I think, the worst thing about this. Is it just shows how poorly run Chelsea are. I mean, I think Graham Potter can actually leave with his head held high. Now, I think a lot of fans have been saying he's probably relieved, because it was I can imagine it was just the amount of players that came in, the amount of talk about what was going on in the boardroom. I'm sure at some point after that Aston Villa game, when he was told that he'd be leaving, obviously he would be upset that he has not managed to succeed at this job, which he was saying that was a big move in his career, and he was looking forward to that next step. There's also a part of him that's going, God, thank God I'm out of that, because this board are flip-flopping between ideas, between what they want as a club, and I don't really want to be a part of that anymore. So a number of reasons why it didn't work and was never really going to work. But yeah, I don't think it's anything on Graham Potter to say that it was his fault that this hasn't worked.
Does anyone want to hear my boring Chelsea stat before we carry on?
Yes, please.
Chelsea spent £323 million alone in January, which is more than the combined military expenditure of Zimbabwe, Bosnia and Moldova. So there you go. I'm not too... you never know, people might be interested in that, but all the military expenditure fans we've got on this podcast as well, it might be a very, very small circle, but there you go. Derren, I'm not too sure many Albion fans will be sympathetic to Potter's plight, will they?
I think there'll be some that really wanted him to do well, but there were some which will probably take, that they'll be sitting there feeling quite smug because they've got a great manager in Roberto De Zerbi. They're challenging for the top four, and the manager who put them on the path to that. Let's be fair, he laid a lot of the foundations for that. But the way he left, the timing of the way he left, and the fact that he took so many of the backroom team with him, particularly Bruno, which the fans loved, although it was Bruno's decision, Potter was sort of seen as the man that instigated it. This. So I think in that regard, Potter has been a bit of a pantomime villain for some of the fans, which we saw in the game against Chelsea at the Amex earlier this season, which Brighton won comfortably. So I think there's some fans that really think, well, Potter did a great job for us, but so is Roberto De Zerbi. We wanted to see him do well, but I don't think there'll be too many feeling sorry for him. Potter's he had a go. It was very difficult circumstances at Chelsea. He's got a payoff in the region of about 13 million, I think, has been reported after 6 months' work at Chelsea. He'll certainly have time to reevaluate what went wrong, what he did, what he could have done better, and then probably come back a better manager. I still think he's got enough credit in the bank to come back and take perhaps a mid-level Premier League team next in the summer, where he can have a pre-season, which he didn't have at Chelsea. And you get the feeling he is the type of manager that does like a pre-season, because his tactics are so fluid.
Well, you mentioned their next moves for Potter, Derren. I saw that the Daily Mail reported that Potter has turned down the chance to become the new Leicester City boss. The Foxes parted company with Brendan Rodgers at the weekend as well. But what do you think the future holds for Potter, Frankie? I've no doubt that there'll be lots and lots of Premier League clubs will be after new managers in the summer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we've had our highest expenditure of managers this season. 13 have gone already. I don't think we're done. I think there's still David Moyes, Steve Cooper, for instance, they're hanging by a thread as it is. I think come the summer, there will be plenty of opportunities. Right now, we're unsure about Palace and Leeds, whether they will continue with the managers they currently have. Leicester, we're not sure if they're going to employ someone just to the end of the season and then look for a more ready-made replacement, a full-time replacement, then. And obviously Spurs as well, obviously more of a big six club, but there's still no word about what their next move is for a manager. So I think there will be plenty of opportunities. I think Derren's right. I think Potter will be desperate for a pre-season. I think that was the thing he actually used to say quite a lot as Chelsea manager, was that he was, the thing that this club he needed more than anything was a pre-season with all these players. He was never given that, unfortunately, but I think that will be his next move. And there's also, I have to say, he's still very much in line for the England manager's job, because he is still one of the best English coaches around. Gareth Southgate is unlikely to manage past the next Euros. Wouldn't see it as too strange for him to not be taking a job until then. He's not going to rush back in, I don't think. I think this summer is probably the best move. But he will want to be careful, because I mentioned earlier in the week that people like David Moyes and Frank Lampard, who took big jobs from positions like Graham Potter from outside the Big Six with not a brilliant track record of winning trophies, they struggled after those jobs ended. Obviously, Lampard at Everton didn't work out very well. David Moyes at Sunderland and Real Sociedad, they were failures. So he'll want to make sure that he is making the right move to the right club that can support him, like Brighton did. But in the current Premier League climate, where clubs are so desperate for instant results and to stay in the Premier League, without any fear of relegation, it's unlikely that Potter will get a lot of time, which is what he needs, as what Brighton afforded him. Because I struggle to think that teams outside of the top 10 can go, well, we can spend 2-3 seasons battling relegation, and then we can become like Brighton have become, because they're just so worried about the amount of money they're spending will not keep them in the Premier League. So it's quite a tricky situation for him. He's still a very, very good manager, and there's still lots of options, but I think he will be regretting leaving Brighton, because they gave him everything that he possibly needed for his type of coaching style.
Well, you mentioned Frank Lampard there. He looks set to become the new interim manager at Chelsea, and I'm pretty sure that his first game at Stamford Bridge will be against Brighton. What do you make of that appointment, Frankie Lampard to Chelsea? Does it inspire, or is it a head scratcher?
I think it sums up the Chelsea hierarchy as it is. I mean, they've got rid of Graham Potter, who was, a manager that hadn't proven himself at the highest level, and brought in another manager that's not proven himself at the highest level. Frank Lampard is a Chelsea legend. I think that they are trying to win the fans back on side, which makes sense because they've alienated them over the last 7-8 months. So there is that thing. But in regards to wanting to move up the table quickly, doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally. They are playing Real Madrid in the Champions League quarterfinal. Frank Lampard's never managed a Champions League quarterfinal game. They're playing one of the best teams in Europe. So in regards, if they're looking to win, obviously they sound to me that they're not trying to win that competition by hiring someone like that. It seems a bit crazy to me, because I was assuming the reason they were getting rid of Graham Potter was to save their season with someone like Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique, who is a Champions League proven manager of a big club, and then maybe go from there in the summer with a different appointment. But they've gone with Frank Lampard. He's not a guaranteed results man. He doesn't work quickly. So outside of the fact that the fans will be more behind the team now, which is an important aspect, don't get me wrong. If they're looking for results, it's still very much a coin flip as to whether it would be a success or not, because there's no track record in place, especially after the Everton job.
Moving on to Crawley Town, they were dragged back into the League Two relegation mire following a thumping loss at Mansfield. It seemed to me to be a performance that harked back to mid-February, Mark, when the Reds couldn't buy a win and they were woefully out of form. Is that kind of the sum of it, or have I massively overestimated that kind of result?
No, I think you're right there. I wasn't at the game, but I watched the highlights and watched quite an extended package of highlights from it. And as Scott Lindsay said afterwards, it was like they'd never defended before or learned how to defend. It was an absolute shocker. I mean, it was 1-0 at half time, which was, as we all know, is no matter how badly you're performing, you're still in the game at 1-0. But then 3 goals, and I think in 15 minutes, I think it was, or 20 minutes at the start of the second half, just killed them off. And if you watch the highlights, Mansfield were just walking into the box and shooting for fun. It was just, don't know where it came from, because like you said, they were unbeaten 5 games before that, had a couple of clean sheets in there, and where it came from. And they had a pretty much full strength defence with Joel Lynch, Dion Conroy, Kellen Gordon, Mazida Gungbo, and they even tried to shore it up in midfield. They brought Anthony Grant in for his first start as a sort of the holding midfielder and that, but yeah, no, it was a really disappointing defeat. And like Scott Lindsay said at the end, he is looking for an instant response on Good Friday because it was a little bit out of character seeing what we've seen in the last sort of month or so.
Has that result taken the wind out of Crawley Town's sails a little bit? As mentioned, that defeat coupled with wins for Hartlepool and Rochdale, who we were basically assuming were down and out. This must be such a kick in the teeth for the players and the management.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, we didn't see a player after the game on Saturday, which tends to be the pattern now. If Crawley get a beating away from home, we don't get a post-match with the player. But yeah, it will have done because after the what game was it? It was the Grimsby game, 1-1. They were 5 games undefeated, 5 points clear of the relegation zone, and the chat amongst all the fans and everybody was like, "Okay, bit of breathing space now. Get some kind of result at Mansfield." I don't think anyone was expecting anything spectacular at Mansfield, but maybe a draw, push. But the fact that they got lost and the manner that they got beaten, and then Hartlepool winning and Rochdale winning, suddenly it's all back. Yeah, they're dragged right back into it again. And you look at the fixtures they've got coming up, a couple of tough ones this weekend, but then they've got Colchester, who are right in it as well. In their and then the big one at Hartlepool. That game at Hartlepool on April the 22nd could be make or break for either team. So yeah, no, it's yeah, it really has. It did knock the wind out of me a little bit. I was sitting there watching, thinking, "Oh, good, we get a win or something at Mansfield, and then Hartlepool lose, and we'll have I can relax for the rest of the season, sort of thing, kind of thing." But a few dead rubbers, but there's not going to be one dead rubber for any of that bottom 4 or even 5. Harrogate's still in there as well. So it's it's still huge games coming up now. Huge games.
Why don't they just make things easy for themselves, Mark? That's what I want to know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's easy football, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, on a more positive note, I suppose Scott Lindsay has been nominated for Manager of the Month for March in League 2 after collecting 11 points from 7 games during the month. Those 11 points included vital wins over Harrogate and Rochdale. It hasn't been easy for Lindsay since joining the Reds. As we mentioned, he had that torrid winless run in February. It's good to see him getting some plaudits, but if he wins it, I guarantee that he'd trade that award for League 2 safety.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'll be even surprised if he even knows he's been nominated for it. Because having spoken to him in the past and that, he's just got one thing on his mind: safety. That's all he cares about, and putting in good performances for the fans and that. So, but yeah, he does deserve it for the way they turned it around with those 5 games unbeaten run. Again, it's just sort of a lot of that good work was sort of knocked out on Saturday. But he knows what he wants, and I think give him the summer and he'll get the team he wants. He'll get him playing how he wants, and next year will be a much better year for Crawley Town. I think it's interesting because tomorrow marks a year since WAGME have taken over Crawley Town, so we asked some of the fans to sort of sum up that year. I mean, obviously, I asked them to keep it clean. We can't print some of the language that I'm sure some of them wanted to use. But I asked them to look at the positives, the negatives, and what needs to change in the next year. And most of them all mentioned that they've got the right man in charge now. That's one of the positives to take. They have got the right man in charge. He's brought in Ben Gladwin, who all the fans seem to love already. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserves. Whether he'll win it, I know there's a couple of other teams that play. I think Northampton managers in there.
Yeah.
He got 13 points from 5 games, and he had an injury crisis or something. So, I don't think he'll win it. But like you said, he won't care if he wins it or not. He just wants to get 3 points, 6 points this Easter weekend. So
yes, speaking of this Easter weekend, Bradford and then Barrow, both these teams are in the shout for the League 2 playoffs. So how do you see these games going, Mark? Better or much be better than Mansfield, surely?
Yeah. The only thing they got only from the team, Crawley, just not performing. But the record they have against Bradford and Barrow is quite amazing. So Crawley haven't lost in 6 games against Bradford. They drew there in October, 1-1 with James Tilley equaliser. That was during Lewis Young's successful little stint as interim manager. And Barrow as well, they haven't... I think they've only lost 1 in the 5 games they played them in League 2. So, and that includes a 1-0 win in November under Lewis Young again. So it's going to be tough. Bradford, they've got big ambitions. They're a big club, as we know. Mark Hughes in charge. Their first season. They've got ambitions. They want to get promoted this year, whether it be through the playoffs or, well, they're not going to get automatic, but through the playoffs. But Crawley at home are a match for any team, and they've got more chance tomorrow than they have on Monday, I think, against Barrow. Barrow will be a really tough job. I mean, who wants to go to Barrow on a bank holiday Monday? God, not me for one. But again, it's one of those things. Scott Lindsay will want 6 points. Realistically, I think if they get 4 points from this weekend, it's a cracking weekend for them. Anything less than that is going to be tough, especially if Hartlepool and Rochdale again pick up results this weekend. But yeah, no, I think I can't see them putting out another Mansfield performance. And yeah, their records. I know history doesn't count for a lot, but teams do look at it, don't they? They do look at form in previous seasons and that. And I think, I think Crawley will pick up points this weekend.
Moving on to the score predictions. Brighton at Spurs this weekend. Derren, how do you see that one going?
Yeah, I'm confident. I think, as I mentioned, I think Brighton are playing in. They know their style. They know how to approach these games now. So it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to go for a 2-1 to Brighton for this one. I think Matoma and Welbeck this weekend.
Frankie, what about yourself?
Yeah, like Derren, I think this is Brighton's moment. I think they're coming in. They're playing a Spurs team that couldn't be more fragile, and they are sky high. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 Brighton win. I'm going to go with a Matoma goal.
Mark?
Well, if there's one team that's even more of a shambles than Crawley Town, it's Tottenham, innit? So I think Brighton definitely going to win. I'm going to go for 3-1. I'm going for a big positive win. I can't, take advantage of what's going on of Brighton's good form and Tottenham's bad form and situation.
And Crawley, as mentioned, played Bradford and Barrow. Mark, what are your score predictions for those two games over the Easter Bank holiday weekend?
Well, I do think they're going to win tomorrow. Crowd will get behind them. They've had big crowds already this season there. So I think I'm going for a 2-0 or 2-1 for Crawley. The last three results for Barrow Crawley, home and away, have been 1-0 to Crawley Town. I don't think it will be 1-0 to Crawley Town, but I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. 1-1 draw at Barrow for Crawley. 4 points this weekend, which will be a really good result for them.
Frankie, how do you see those two going for Crawley?
Yeah, two difficult games. I think Mark's right. I think the home advantage on Friday will play a big factor. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 Crawley win there. And then I'm going to go for a 2-1 defeat away at Barrow.
And finally, Derren, how do you see Crawley getting on?
It's so hard to predict Crawley, isn't it, at the moment? I think that they could get a draw against Mark Hughes' team against Bradford, but I can't see them getting anything away from Barrow. They haven't always been that convincing on the road. So I think a point against Bradford and then a 1-0 defeat at Barrow.
Very quickly, today is also the only day.
Sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry. Derren says it's hard to predict there. I think we should mention Steve Bone, who predicted all the right results last week's podcast. So I think he's definitely worth a mention there. So it's not too hard to predict as long as you're Steve Bone.
Yeah, did he get them all right?
He got them all right last week. Yeah, the only one of all three of us, I think, to get them nailed on.
Yeah, I was never invited back.
Yeah.
Yes, you say that the score predictions are never easy to predict, unless you're Steve Bone, who managed to get them all right last week, which is why he's now banned from the podcast and will never be seen ever again. Mark, it's also the opening day of the county championship season. Sussex are at home to Durham. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, I mean, Sussex have got home advantage, obviously. I mean, I don't know if they've started yet or not, but I think with Paul Farbrace in charge, we talked about it a lot last week. I think there's got to have to be a mindset, and I think Paul Farbrace is the right man to come in and do that. They've got so many good young players, along with experienced players. So I think, they need to get a good start, and I think they will get it against Durham.
And Frankie, you were at the Sussex Media Day. Do you echo Mark's sentiments about Sussex getting off to a good start?
I do. I think it's a must-win first game to really set the tone for what they said. They spoke a big game last week, and with Bajara opening the batting for them and captaining the side, an excellent player. It's a real opportunity at home to kickstart what could be a brilliant season with, as Mark said, some very, very talented young players. But if they lose, the old creeping doubts of the fact that they've got no winners in their side and they haven't, and it can just snowball into another season where they finish at the bottom half of the county championship table. It's a real crucial game to start with. So I'm hopeful of a win. But I can't stress the importance of it enough for what they want to achieve.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for all your time this week, chaps. You can catch up with all the late sports news covering everything that we've talked about today online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you all next week.